Hi, Fearless Builder Girls. Welcome to Tool School. I'm Emily Pillaton, and I'm the founder and executive director of Girls Garage here in Berkeley, California. So we thought it would be fun over the next couple days to release a series of videos where every day we talk about a different tool or a building skill, and over the course of all the videos, we're going to build a small wooden box project. So you can follow along as I do it here in the wood shop, or maybe you want to give it a shot in your own home or your own garage. Okay, so lesson number 1 today, we are going to talk about lumber. Lumber is probably the most common type of wood product. You might also find plywood or particle board on your next trip to your hardware store or lumber yard, but for our project we're going to use lumber. It's very common, but also there's some sneaky things about how it's dimensioned, and I want to give you some tips for how to go and shop for lumber. So, first things first, what is lumber? Lumber is a piece of wood that has been cut directly out of a log or a tree trunk, and it's cut to a very specific dimension. So you might also hear lumber called dimensional lumber for this reason. There's lots of different dimensions that you can buy lumber in. This is a 2x4, this is a 1x6, a 1x10, you can buy 1x2s, 4x4s, 4x8s, and so on and so on. The important thing is that it is a piece of a tree and it is dimensioned to a specific size. So let's talk about those sizes. This is a 2x4. This obviously is a short length. I bought this as a much longer 8-foot long length of 2x4. But those numbers, the 2 and the 4, refer to the size, the height and the width of the board. That's true here of the 1x6, the 1 and the 6, or the 1 and the 10 for these boards. So that is a standard format. It's X by Y. The problem with those numbers is that 2x4 is what's called a nominal dimension. That means that's what we call it. But there's also an actual dimension, which is not the same as what we call it. So you would think, oh, a 2x4 is 2 inches tall by 4 inches wide. Wrong. Let's see what it actually is. 1.5 inches tall by 3.5 inches wide. Why on earth would the lumber industry do this to us? That is so confusing. So the answer lies in the way that lumber is milled. When a tree is cut down and it is cut into, it's sliced into all these pieces, the original piece that's cut out of the tree actually is 2 inches by 4 inches. But then 2 things happen to this board. The first thing is that it gets set onto a rack to dry for a period of time, and as it dries, it shrinks. However, this board that's sitting on the rack next to her friend is not drying necessarily at the same rate, so they may shrink different amounts. So then the second thing that happens is that the lumber mill will take the board and put it through a planing machine that trims it down to a uniform size. So every board, no matter how it dried, is planed down to a size that we can depend on. So you can always depend on your 2x4 being 1.5 by 3.5, but it will never be 2x4. Okay, that's also true for these 1x boards that we're using for our project. This is a 1x6, so we would think 1 inch tall by 6 inches wide. No, what do we think it is? It is 3/4 of an inch tall by 5.5 inches wide. Okay, our 1x10 is, you guessed it, 3/4 of an inch tall by, you might be thinking 9.5, it's actually 9.25. Okay, you do not have to remember all these numbers. These are easily searchable conversion charts, but the important thing to remember is that whatever the lumber is called, the nominal dimension is not the same as what it is in real life. That's super important because if you're working on a project where if I'm framing an entire wall and I've done my drawings assuming this is 2 inches, by the time I get to the end of my wall, everything's gonna be off, it's all gonna be wacky. So just remember that there are nominal dimensions and then there are actual dimensions. Okay, for our project, we are gonna use a 1x6 and a 1x10. Both of these pieces of lumber are pine wood. when you go to the lumber yard or the hardware store, these might also be called common boards. They're relatively inexpensive, and they are called common because they're quite common, and they're easy to find. This is a wood that's very easy to regrow and grow. So this is a pine 1x6 board and a pine 1x10 board. So I want to just give you a couple tips for how to shop for your lumber. Hopefully you are able to select your own boards, and if you can, you want to do something called sighting. When you sight a board, what you're looking for is you want to try to find a board that is straight in all dimensions, in all directions. So I'm first going to look down the top edge of my board. It helps to close one eye, you can see a little better. And what I'm looking for is to make sure my board is not swooping off in one direction or the other. Also that it's not cupping. There's no like bump or depression in the center. So this looks good. I'm also going to look down the edge. And this is where you might also have a bow or some kind of bend. So I'm looking to make sure this is straight. It looks pretty good. The other thing I'm going to look for is imperfections in the board. And so one of those things is knots. I have 2 big knots in this board, and for our project, I'm not that concerned with it because I'm not going to use a huge piece of this board. I'm going to use smaller pieces. I can kind of avoid the knots. But if you can help it, you want to try to pick a board that doesn't have a lot of knots, because these can cause weakness in whatever you're building. Also, if you have a knot that's right on the edge, that's not ideal, because you may find yourself having to put a screw directly into that knot, and that's going to make your life a lot more difficult. So no knots if you can choose one. And then the last thing is cracks. So you also want to look at the end of your board, and if you have cracks that are short, like ½ an inch, that's okay. You can lop that off and start from there. But beware cracks that start at the edge and make their way, like migrate all the way into the middle of your board. We don't want to use a board that's just going to crack on us. The other place you may see cracks is along the edges. You might see one that starts here and then it sort of migrates into the center. So anything that has long cracks we want to discard also. It's very sad when you have to look at a board and then discard it. It's like it doesn't get to fulfill its life purpose, but unfortunately we do need good wood for our projects to work. So choose your boards wisely. And that's it for now. What we're going to do next time is actually start drawing out the drawing for our box, and we're going to make something called a cut list, which is like a recipe for building, and that's going to be the list that we reference to cut all of our pieces at the sizes that we need. And we will do that next time tomorrow.